Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the latest episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah. Today, we have another member of the Man of Action studio slash collective. His name is Duncan Rouleau. And Duncan is an artist, a writer. He has work that spans comics, animation, video games, and we get into everything in his repertoire. We talk about his breaking into comics on the miniseries Venom the Hunted, working with Larry Hama early on, where he came on board with Man of Action, things in animation like their big Ben 10 series, as well as X-Men Legends. And what else? We talk about his independent, or rather creator-owned comics, things like The Nightmarist and The Great Unknown. We talk about Metal Men a little bit, the 2006 series that he illustrated. And we get into everything, that he's been executive producing on the animation side. So enough of my blathering. Let's get to it. This is Duncan Rouleau. Duncan Rouleau with us. Duncan, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Glad to have you. As always, our first question is, how did you first discover comics?
Oh, well, I can even tell you there's discovering and then there's really seeing them, for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
We used to, my grandmother lived out on the East Coast. I grew up in Chicagoland area, and we would go to her place out on the East Coast. We would drive a family car trip, Ford LTD station wagon. And my mom would try, I had three older brothers, so my mom would try and pack the car because we rarely stopped, or if we did, we just camped overnight somewhere. Pack the car with a whole bunch of just things to occupy us so that we wouldn't get into fistfights. And so comic books were always a staple of that. But I remember coming home from a trip, and this will date me, I suppose. Well, oh well, I'm old. Uh, uh, the It was Avengers 117. It was the beginning of the this thing called the Evil Eye uh, storyline, where the Avengers
Mm.
and the newly formed Defenders crossover books. And it was the one just before it that had this character named Loki. And I didn't know who any of these characters were, but he was plotting to get these two groups to fight each other over the Evil Eye. And what my mom would normally do after hosing down the car and throwing out all of the things that gathered in the corners, she would also toss out the comic books. But I remember thinking, I really love that thing, and that Black Panther character was so damn cool, and I wanted to know what happened to it. I dug through the garbage can and I got it out, and then I started going when I would go to the local drugstore or to the local 7-Eleven. I saw that there were more of these things, and this is really I want to say I'm about 12, maybe 11, somewhere in there. Um, and I realized that there were more of these things, and so I had a lawn mowing empire. I mowed 4 or 5 different lawns on my block, and I started saving up my money, and I would just go to the stores there, and then eventually I started getting some subscriptions, and then I had an uncle, and everybody has those cool uncles, or at least I did. I had a cool uncle who would go to swap meets. He loved going to swap meets on Sunday mornings. So they were not they were they weren't quite as everywhere as they are now. I would just discover that there were these places that sold had back issues, and I was aghast that there were older comic books than the ones that they were being made in the 70s. And then my collection fever just blew up. And it's around the same time that my that I forgot when How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. I think I want to say 78, somewhere around there that book came out.
That sounds right.
Um and I was just trying to draw everything that I saw in the books. I was making my own comic books. I just fell in love with the storytelling and just all of the imagery and stuff like that. So I started copying everything, and then that book came out, and then I think my fate was sealed around there. So
So you made as much as you can when you're that young, as sort of an immediate decision. I'd like to do this for the rest of my life. This is fun.
well, okay, that's actually interesting because no, um, what had happened was I had a deep love for it, but this is a different time. Ah, boy, it's kind of odd, but so all the things that I really loved when I was a kid that were nerd adjacent, um, they were not the cool things. Those were not the socially acceptable things. I only find out later that a lot of friends like comic books or played D&D or whatever. But I had a little group of friends that we did all of that stuff, but we kept it. We kept it on the QT. We did not. We did not. We did not want to be, you know, attacked in halls. I think so. I definitely drew, and my dad was a graphic artist. My mom was an art teacher, so they most definitely encouraged it. All my other brothers realized there was no money in art, and so they all went and became lawyers and engineers. And I couldn't compete on that front, so I started drawing. But I, when I was like 18 or whatever, I actually went to school for English and theater. I did not go for comic books. And when I came out to California and was just looking to work in film industry, I started doing storyboard work because I could draw. But I did not formally go to school for art. I started going to it. I took a lot of art classes in school, but I started taking more art classes on my own out here. But I had a storyboard career going. I was working on films and TV at the time. And I met Neil Adams, who was working on that stuff. And he saw my stuff and goes, "Hey, ever interested in doing comics?" And I knew who he was. I
Mhm.
was enamored with him. I was kind of gobsmacked. So I brought my portfolio over, and he went, "No, you're not ready, kid." But I took that as a clarion call because I had loved all of it, and I kind of set it aside for a while to. It didn't seem like it was something, the internet and all of that stuff, it was all in New York, and I was never in New York. That's where it all happened. If you wanted to work, you had to live there, and that just seemed like a million miles away. So I kind of just backlogged it, but so it's like, I want to say 91, 90, 91, somewhere in there. I met him, and I started putting my portfolio together, started doing life study courses, things like that. And then I started submitting my work around because between him and another friend that I met out here who was just doing comic pages for fun, I went, I used to love to do this, and I wonder if I could do this as well. So it was a weird trip. It
Hmm.
was I think I moved away from it. I missed the '80s, a good portion of the '80s in comics, and started coming back to them. Like '89, I started kind of reintroducing myself. Once Phoenix died, which was what, 81, 82, somewhere in there.
Hmm.
I and comics started getting more expensive. They were like starting to be 75 cents to around 75 cents to maybe even getting into the dollar stuff. And I was 18, 19. I was wanting to use that money now to
Do
do
other stuff.
teenage, yeah, do teenage, pay for gas. So
Yeah, I can understand that. I had myself, and I've talked to a lot of others that there's always this break, or seems to be always this break in the late teenage years, like late high school, early college, where everybody's off doing kind of their own thing, and eventually kind of make their, maybe some don't, but everybody I've
right.
talked to eventually makes their way back to comics, maybe in their like early mid 20s.
Yeah, it was the same. I think that was I do think that in some ways, what I at least take as a silver lining of that time period the 20 years wandering in the desert kind of time period, is I also really started exploring all kinds of other art and other types of storytelling. And with a, because I had a deep background working in film and TV and cinema, that form of storytelling, just, looking at directors and how they edit things and stuff like that. And I really was immersed in that for a and still am in a big period of time for how to effectively tell a story and things like that. And I could bring some of that information. And I think I'm maybe one of these people, or I was one of these people that really needed to thoroughly soak themselves in something for a while, and then they move on once they kind of, So I did that for a while, kind of gathering different elements that I then would bring together and synthesize into my work that I do now.
You referred to this already. You basically broke in during the 90s, which was an unique era in comics.
It's a much reviled one, isn't it? And unique.
I use unique because depends on who you
Yes,
talk
who
to.
you
I mean,
talk to.
it was when I was, 11, 12-year-old kid and getting into comics. So for me, it holds, a lot of nostalgic value. That was how I was introduced. But it was, as we say, unique. A lot of extreme characters, a lot of extreme personalities. The creators were definitely put more on a pedestal, or were more out there in front than I think they ever were before. Let me ask you and make sure I got this right. That was your first Simon on Venom the Hunted? Was that your first break-in
My
comic?
very first in the Marvel DC sphere of comics, because
Yes.
I had worked on some smaller press stuff with Hart Fisher at Boneyard Press, and I worked with um, uh, uh, an independent press with a couple of people for books that they had more limited circulation. But my very first Marvel work was a fill-in on Wolverine because Adam Kubert was taking a couple of issues off. So that was my very first job in the professional realm of comicdom, and then Venom after that. So
Okay. Well, two characters that certainly were 90s. They weren't 90s creations in the case of Wolverine. I mean, Venom, I guess, started in the 80s. But they were definitely
well,
emblematic.
they were most definitely the most heralded because they were you know they were animalistic. They were fun to draw. They were also probably very fitting for a lot of the style of the art of that
Hmm.
time period. Lots of teeth and fangs and these kind of over muscular figures and things like that. They were perfect for that style. They really fit that whatever that whatever you want to call that zeitgeist as
Huh.
that that need for it.
Were you
Because
happy to get those first assignments,
oh
particularly those
yeah,
characters?
oh absolutely. I mean, so I the everybody I suppose they kind of identify when they were like knee deep in the collection, kind of loving comic book phase. And mine was John Byrne and Chris Claremont's first initial run on X-Men. I was a big Avengers guy and I was a big Captain America guy. I loved all of that stuff. I grew up right in the middle of the bicentennial, so Captain America was almost like a prerequisite at that time. Uh, but those were kind of the characters, and I loved a lot of DC characters like that. I love Manhunter, the new Manhunter, and Batman, and all the Jim Aparo stuff, and Spider-Man, obviously. But when I got back into it, where I was stylistically and where those characters were, I could fit into it pretty quickly, and so I was happy that that was my my entree new into the professional world of comics because it was something that I felt like I could do. Um, and then I started doing the X books after that, and those were fun. But a lot of the X books, the stuff that I grew up with, like I said, Avengers, X-Men, and Spider-Man. Those were my guys. You know, that was the stuff I loved. Um, I did move over to, well, I suppose we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right. Yes, I did like drawing those things. Um, one of the very first things, I had told Joe Kelly this when we first met, and I had actually even talked to Larry Hama about this and other people. I was very interested at the time because the conversation was, if you have something that you're creating, don't do it over at Marvel, do it, at Image, or do it one of those things. Creator own stuff.
Mhm.
Just if you're going to work over there, do their characters, but don't bring anything new to it. And one of the things that I loved was, all of the imagination that Jack Kirby brought to everything. And I didn't care where I was. I always wanted to participate in adding to something. I didn't want to retell a whole bunch of stuff. So even with the Venom stuff was the xenophage on there, just wanted to create new terrors so that if you wanted to go back and read back issues, you could enjoy those. But then these ones weren't rehashes. It wasn't like, oh, they're doing this story again or they're doing that story. So
And how was working with Larry Hama, being one of your first, if not your first, writer collaborator?
right. We had a couple of really nice phone calls. In general, he was busy doing a whole bunch of stuff. I was a new guy, so he was just a very professional, very kind, and most of my conversations were with the editors. To be
Hmm.
honest, we just had a meet and greet and a couple of questions here and there about stuff. But he was, like I said, he was busy. I was a new
Was
guy.
was that your expectation of working in the industry, that you would be mostly conversing with the or conversing through the editors, and not working necessarily closely with the writer?
To be honest, I don't know if I had a clear idea of how I always thought it would work. I always knew that the editor, because they were the person who was hiring me at the time, so they most definitely were my introduction into the book. But I had been writing scripts. I had an agent out here. I had been working in story and narrative, and I also wanted to create new things.
Mm.
I didn't necessarily. So I had a thirst, and also I thought, and I think too, to a degree, um, a way to talk to to gather the original intent. The editor's always great, and they're going to give you the best kind of shorthand version of what is required, and then also what the company is requiring of the book too. But I would often want to talk to the writer just to kind of get to know them. Why, where did this come out, so that we could find some other level inside of the stories. And I had that with Howard Mackey. He was really great. He was
Mm.
very giving with his time and stuff like that. And we talked an awful lot. And he most definitely worked differently than some of the other guys. Some of these guys were and Howard was one of them, but I actually prefer that Marvel way, which was these looser outlines.
Mm.
They would leave it up to me to beat out the panels. Like, here's 3 pages. This has to happen. This has to happen, and this has to happen. So it was really nice to have those conversations too. Going, what are some of your expectations? What are some of your needs? What do you want? Things like that.
Right. As you said, you kind of bumped around the X books for a while after Venom, and you'll have to remind me of the exact year. But you pretty early on, or is it the 25th anniversary? Did you guys meet in 2000? Your Man of Action
We
partners?
did. Yeah. Well, now we met long before that.
Okay.
Um, the way that we finally became Man of Action, and this was in part because if you didn't have creators like the guys who created Image, who went out and kind of staked their own ground.
Right.
I think that we might not have been, you need those, it's always good to have those, oh, you can do that kind of role models. Much like the guy who was drawing comic books out here, I went, oh, I think I could actually do this for a living. It didn't dawn on me until then. I was just kind of bumping around. Um, we met, let's see, I met Steve Seagle first, long before we ever actually worked on anything. Just because we're local and we met at some kind of, gathering party thing. And we hit it off. We were just friends and we would just kind of hang out. But the first person out of the Man of Action that I worked with was Joe Kelly, was on Juggernaut, a one-off. And I just enjoyed the script so much. I just called him up and said, "This is fantastic. I just wanted to get to know you." So we developed a phone friendship and we started talking about other stories. And I I had friends who worked in Image and stuff like that, and they were asking me if I wanted to maybe do a book. And Brian Haberlin was somebody, and I had talked to Joe about maybe doing this thing called MREX. So when we were kind of just batting around ideas for books and things like that, I was doing the X books at the time, and then the strangest thing happened. Uh, Joe started Deadpool, and Steve was working with um, Scott Clark on the new iteration of Alpha Flight. And Alpha Flight was a book that I loved, and I also, because they were introduced in the X-Men during my run, I was kind of geeking out as a fanboy on that. And both of them at the same time, because uh, asked if I would, because Scott was not making deadlines, and neither was, I don't want to disparage him, but he wasn't making deadlines either on Deadpool. And both of them asked me if I would like to work with them on their books at that time. And I went with with Alpha Flight because I love those books. And there
How
was
do you feel
that.
about that now?
Both of them are close friends. I love them. How do I feel about it? Big Hero 6 came
Yes.
out of
That was a
Alpha Flight.
huge thing.
So,
Yeah.
um, what? There is only one regret that I have. I had gotten Death Blow over at
Hmm.
Wildstorm. I
Yeah.
was going to do that. And I had been talking to Bill Kaplan, who was the editor in chief over there at the time, and we hit it off and we're talking about what possible books. And he said, "Would you like to come and replace Tim Sale?" Uh, which is just ridiculous. So I was like, "Yeah, okay, great." At the same time, I had gotten a call to do a Spider-Man book, which turned out to be The Death of Craven. I was like, "Sorry, guys, I'm doing Deadpool, I mean, a Death Blow."
Death blow. Yeah.
That one I think about a lot.
You never know. It's hard in the moment, game things out.
Yeah, you know what? Live with regrets. All the choices that I made brought me here, so I'm
Yes,
fine. I'm totally
exactly.
fine with that. I met Steve, met Joe, and then Joe Casey was bopping around. He was a friend of Steve's, and uh, when we started talking about uh, creator-owned books, Joe and I had done MREX, which then turned into Generator Rex later on. And we were at a San Diego con, and we decided to get a booth. And so we said, well, let's just pool our money and give ourselves a name. And we called ourselves Man of Action because Joe was working on Action Comics at the time. I was
Mhm.
actually working with him on Action Comics at the time. But he was going to do that as a blog, Man of Action, Joe Kelly, and that's why we took the name. We were going to do Evil Geniuses, but it was already taken.
Oh yeah,
So
who has that? That's a Hollywood one, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, but that name that name has been trademarked probably since the 60s,
True.
by
Yeah.
somebody. And for some reason, Man of Action was not. And Maybe it's because the only reason that you would want to call yourself Man of Action is if you were to do that as an individual, the eye rolls you would get. But as a group, it's confusing enough that you
Right.
can separate it enough.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I think it works. So I wanted to ask you because I think of Man of Action as a writers collective, and you basically are. You just happen to have a visual arts background, I think more than the other three. Uh, is there any discussion about that when coming into Man of Action, as you know, you would be kind of relied on, or what your role would be in terms of the visuals for the projects you were involved in?
um, sure, up to a degree. So Steve has made friends with a lot of really, as he was moving through, made friends with a lot of great artists. I mean, Michael Allred, Teddy Christensen, Guy Davis, Matt Wagner, all of these guys. And they most definitely populated a different space than I did as far as the kind of work that they were putting out. Indie, cutting edge, kind of, quirky to whatever you want to put it, or however you want to define those guys. But they most definitely, including Tim Sale too,
Mhm.
which he did. So he already had. He's one of these guys that he hunts the Comic Cons and meets and befriends artists who he really likes working with, and so his aesthetics are, and I guess I fit into that for some slot for him visually. Um, but what I did offer also is that we could sit there and we could work out story and we could work out and if he was at that time, each one of us being a comic book artist, I could really only do one book a month. Being a writer, they generally also needed to do at least 3 to 4 books just to make a weekly, pay the bills. Um, so if they were to take on more work, I might supplement some of the writing, like, oh, just keep it super loose. I'll do this stuff and then we can talk about it. It's very Marvel way kind of way. So that's something that we had already worked into our system as individuals, as collaborators on different stuff. And so that carried over when we started putting stuff together. I most definitely did one pagers for a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
but if it was outside of what my art conveys, and there's plenty of stuff, more uh less kind of pop aesthetic and more noir or whatever. We'd ask the pool of artists that we know. And the funny thing is, since I came up as an artist in comic books, most of my friends were writers. And as writers, most of their friends were artists. So I did not have as many art friends. We would sit next to each other, and I definitely had friends, but that wasn't the group of people when you were looking for work who who you would talk with.
Right.
They were rivals in
Yes.
some ways. I've never been in a rivalry with any artist. I love,
Or
I just,
friendly competition.
yes, yes. Um, so when we started putting stuff together, most definitely I would put the pitch packages and a lot of the design stuff together. But if it had a specific need that was outside of my scope, we would ask people to bring it in. It was just that we were going to pool our resources.
Makes a lot
At
of sense.
so
Yeah.
and at that time, Joe is Joe Kelly and Steve and Joe Casey too. We had when we first started, between all the books and the circulation of the books, we had over 1 million books in circulation each month because we were doing all the flagship titles. It was either all the X books or it was all the Superman or Justice League stuff. So it was always, and this was a time in the 90s, or actually at the turn of the 90s, when comic books were starting to become recognized as material for film. And so
Hmm.
it was just a real and TV. And so it was just a really fortuitous time to be kind of uh, living out in Los Angeles, or already having a lot of film and TV background and representation, and also having this as a kind of a connective tissue. It all worked for us, but it was all. I'd love to say we planned it, but we didn't. So it
Well,
just.
a lot of man of action projects are in the realm of animation and video games and non-comics. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you do a lot of work individually or maybe even together on comics, but maybe not as necessarily man of action. Um, yeah. So I wanted to get into a couple of the man of action projects. One that stuck out was X-Men Legends. I don't know if that was the first one, but how did that gig come about? Sort of writing for a video game with characters, of course, you guys are all familiar with.
Well, that was one of those fortuitous things. The guys over at Raven, who were the guys who put the game together for Activision, reached out because all of us were working on the X books at that time, or had just finished doing big runs on the X-Men and Uncanny X-Men and X Factor and Cable and a bunch of other ones, and they wanted to use the X universe in the game, and so we were probably the most up to date voices for the material. So they reached out, and we said, well, we're a collective, so let's, if you want us, you should bring us all in. And so they did. Um, I had video game back. I played video games. I had no video game background, and Joe Kelly is also a big video game guy. Joe and Casey and Steve have since been inaugurated into video games, but so we knew who Raven was and whatnot. But when we got there, the writing on a comic, from a comic to a film to a video game, is so different. It's so different. Um, where I think you have some kind of synthesis is with and where we learned it, because that's, I think we learned on the field with that one with video games. It's a lot of extra dialogue, like stuff that might not ever be said, and things that you want a character to say that don't get tiring hearing it 9,000 times played during the game, things like that. So there was a lot of branching stuff, but it was kind of a choose your own adventure aspect to it that was really kind of cool. It's like, well, Magneto could do this, or he could do that, or you could do this, and then you pursue each one, which was a little different than from a writing comics or writing animation point of view. You had to pick one because you were telling a story. You weren't allowing the player to tell their own story. So it was liberating that way. But that's how that I think it was Joe Casey that they first contacted on that one, and then brought us all in. I could be wrong. It could be Joe Kelly, but I think it's Joe Casey on that one.
And it was, if I remember correctly, it was an amazing success in terms of a
Yeah, yeah,
franchised video game.
yeah. It's listen, those guys did a great job. We most definitely had a lot of fun doing it, but that a video game, much like animation too, there's a whole team, a whole battery of really talented people that make something good. You can have a good idea, but there's a million ways to screw that up. So if you don't have a bunch of other people, who are contributing to it, you're not going to. So we were, yes, between that and Ben 10, those were like our first two. We were looking like golden children. All of them.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about Ben 10. That was an original concept, I believe, right? Coming out of your studio.
Yeah.
Um, So how did that come about? I mean, was it during just some of your meet? Do you guys just kind of brainstorm?
No, no, actually, this one's a good story. This one's a very different, interesting story. So, I mean, the concept came out of the studio. One of the things that, um, especially coming off the X books, and at this time, it was always like coming up with new mutants with mutant powers that were bizarre and different and stuff like that. But after a certain point, we went, well, we're not working on those books any longer. But that you don't shut that that switch off in your head. And I think Ben was originally going to be this character called Entourage, who could switch with versions of of themselves from multiple dimensions in an X universe.
Hmm.
That was the initial idea that then became Ben, which was there's a long road between those two. Um, Matt Senreich, who was of now of Robot Chicken fame, was an editor over at Wizard, and we were just friends with Matt. And he was trying to start up something with Seth Green, which would later become Robot Chicken. He was doing stop motion stuff, and we just said, "This stuff is so great. You should pursue this." And we were just friends. We were just friends, and he said, "I got approached." Matt said, "I got approached by Cartoon Network, and they want to do a superhero thing because where their frustration was that Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers are under the same umbrella, but the Warner Brothers guys didn't like playing well with the Cartoon Network guys, and vice versa. And so the head of the creative department over at Cartoon Network, a guy named Sam Register, wanted to do his own original superhero. He was getting tired of talking to Paul Levitz and everybody and getting the permission to do stuff, then turned down. And he said, "Screw it, let's just come up with our own stuff." So he had approached Matt because he had seen some of his stuff. Do you have any kind of superhero stuff? And Matt was an editor at Wizard, and so Matt was creative himself and whatnot. He goes, "No, I don't, but you should talk to the Man of Action guys." So we got called in, and said the missive that they gave us was that they were looking for some kind of Fantastic Four kind of thing. It's like, The Incredibles had just come out, or it was around that time. It's like, yeah, you might not want to do that because it'll just be chasing something. Why don't we just come in and we did this thing called 20 pitches in 20 minutes. And if you know Sam Register, it works. I don't know if it would work with everybody because it was just the four of us. We each had five pitches, and we start reading the log and telling what the idea was. And Sam, he's quite an interesting character. If he smoked cigars, he'd be one of those like, yeah, yeah, give me that same feeling kind of guy. But he definitely knows what he likes and what he doesn't like, and he's a force of nature. We were pitching this stuff, and in there was Ben 10. It was called Force 10 at that time. And he's like, "Wait, hold on, what's that one?" So then out of those 20, he picked that one. But out of those 20, we also had Generator X in there, and we also had this thing called the Seven Seas, which then became the Zach Storm thing on Netflix, and a couple of other original stuff. But um, yeah, it was just out of a 20 minutes, 20 pitches in 20 minutes. I always love to say that it was the 10th pitch, but I don't think it was. It's somewhere in the eighth or something like that. And then he wanted to steer it towards Ben turning into 10. We tried out the alternate versions of Amphibiben, and that's if the polar ice caps melted, the water breathing Ben would take over, or if the Roman Empire never fell, there was Benjamin Maximus, and then we had Ben Blood, which is a vampire planet, and so these are all of the different characters he would switch out,
Right.
and I still actually kind of like that idea, but they felt that it was too complicated. A multi-dimensional stuff was too complicated for the 2000s, evidently.
You're ahead
Uh,
of your time.
yeah, that's right. All we were doing was just taking stuff that was back in the 90s and the 80s,
Right, right. Yeah,
you know.
that's true.
Uh, but that is the interesting thing as far as storytelling. This is just a little side thing, but the whole kind of like serialized storytelling, keeping things, all the plates spinning, and what the MCU has done really well for a long period of time was something that we were deeply familiar with, and we were trying to pitch that around to different places, but it was just too big of an idea at the time. Now everybody's doing that, but shared universe kind of stuff. It's like, well, we grew up inside of that storytelling mold, the shared universe. It wasn't anything new to us at that time. But then it went from Ben switching to superheroes. And that one was just too much like Dial H for Hero. It just was. It was
Right.
just, that's all it was. It was like, no, we don't want to do Dial H for Hero. So then we landed on Aliens. Um, And the thing that was most important, there were two things that were most important to me. And I think if you were to ask the other guys and take a poll, it would be, I'm sure there'd be other elements, but I'll speak for myself, was that Ben never stopped being Ben. That it was always, you have these powers, but to me, that was always what was wonderful about Spider-Man, or in the earlier stuff, this teenager kind of trying to figure out the world and stuff like that, and doing dumb teenager stuff, and all of that stuff felt very relatable with these powers. Is that he didn't switch personalities, that he was always that kid, and that also something that I remember us having a conversation. One of the things that I really loved about like the cartoons that I grew up with when I was really young was things like Johnny Quest. And this was a dad and some kids, and there was a bodyguard and all of the other kind of extraordinary stuff. But it was family. It was a family. It wasn't just a lone hero, which we've seen a lot of. And I just wanted to see generational stuff, so that I was starting to have kids at that time myself. And so I wanted parents who are going to be watching these cartoons with their kids, because the kids want them to have something for them inside of it too. And so Grandpa Max, Gwen went back and forth between being a sister to a cousin to uh, pretty much that. There wasn't, if there was any other discussions, they weren't taken seriously, but she needed to be part of the family. So how close was always the question. But, um, so then, I mean, I did a lot of initial designs, but we also brought in Todd. Oh man, Todd Knox, to do the superhero. He did a pass on the superhero stuff, the designs for there. But then when we finally got into production, the amazing, the amazing Devil Pig himself,
Dave Johnson.
Dave Johnson, came in. And quite frankly, when I talk about like a great team of great designers and great people to make things even greater, he absolutely knocked it out of the park with so many of those designs. So um, he just he just did. And between him and Andy Sturmer, who wrote the theme song, and Alex Soto, who was the initial director on those things, without that team, it wouldn't have been what it was. It would have been something, but it wouldn't have been what it turned out to be for so many people.
When did you guys know that you had a hit on your hands? Because it eventually, you probably, I don't know, maybe it was early on, but it became eventually a global franchise with licensors and,
I,
toys and things like that.
there were a couple of events that happened. One, these are like a little more kind of personal ones. Like, so my kids were all, my oldest, let's see, he was probably around 6 or 7 at that time. And all of his friends were around that age. And uh, just talking to, doing parent events, different things like that, going, oh, so what do you do? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I work in animation. Oh, yeah, anything I know. Out here in Los Angeles, people working in film and TV is not a such an outlier. It's
Right.
just like when the person doesn't want to talk about it, then you realize they're probably somebody who's doing something super big and they just don't want to be bothered. It's like, okay, all right. So
Right.
you must be working with Ridley Scott or somebody.
Right. Right.
Uh, but so I was like, oh no, I work in animation right now, comic books and animation, and have this thing called Ben 10, and all the kids would stop and go Ben 10, and I was like, oh, okay. That was like my first kind of up close and personal that other kids were watching it, but we didn't really get an idea of its reach until much later when I remember seeing there was a prime ministers. There was an election for prime ministers in Britain, and one of the questions that was being asked of all the prime ministers on one of the local channels was, "What alien from Ben 10 would you pick?" And I think was like, "What?" Like that was supposed to give you insight into what kind of person that candidate was. And it's like, oh, and they had pat answers too. So by that time, if they had already gone through their political cycles and their speech writers, and they knew that question was coming, that degree of depth of cultural punch was when it really kind of resonated for me. I think it's like, oh wow, oh this is different.
Yeah.
In comic books and in animation in general, you kind of work and you make stuff that happens and gets released way later, and you're already on some other kind of project, and you
Right.
rarely kind of you're too busy doing the next thing that you really kind of spend any time seeing how the other thing went, other than getting it reports from different people. So,
Were you guys consulted when they wanted to do some any kind of like licensing or video games or what have you?
oh yeah,
Anything that was
no, no,
beyond the
definitely,
animation?
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. We all of those kind of fronts. This is the other big learning on the field. I mean, I suppose between the video games, but then also licensing, and probably all where it helped us all put on producerial hats was all of the ancillary stuff, all of the other things that kind of create, uh, a brand,
Right.
so to
Right.
speak. And so that was a big learning curve. Yeah, no, we all of those things, and I had no idea. Being in art, business itself when I was growing up was a little bit of an anathema. It's like, I don't want to wear a suit. I don't want to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in business. I want to be an artist. But if you really want to be an art, have a career as an art, you got to learn the business side of it. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and so that was a fun learning curve though, because listen, Cartoon Network had their machine already. There were a lot of really smart people, listened to them, had a couple of like, well, this is the thing. And it was more about keeping the glue together, making sure that nothing strayed too far, that you didn't have Flash on a motorcycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the stigma of having selling out as an artist has certainly diminished over time, and I think people kind of understand like commerce and art are sort of intertwined, especially nowadays, and you have to in order to continue to make the art.
Oh, well, definitely. I think that's almost always true. There used to be a lot of people that would represent and protect an artist, and often take advantage of an artist, who would be their agents, be their managers, and the forward-facing kind of business side of stuff. And those people, some of them are still really, really necessary and really good at what they do. Um, it's where you get this synthesis of somebody who either wants to be a creative, but they're a business person, and then they start making decisions that maybe they need to spend more time with the artists to find out better methods, or less well, ones that might smell as crass or too commercial, or become, somehow diminish the project. You want to know always to make sure that the project feels strong. But right now, I mean, with social media, if you don't know how to brand yourself a little bit, you're kind of on the out period of everything.
Right.
And so it is the those kind of social mores have definitely changed. There's an understanding now of just whatever you want to call it, whatever your forward facing kind of image is that you need to do certain things to either preserve it or to make sure that it's properly you know shown the way that you want it to be. Control it however you want to talk about it, whatever term you want to use. And I think that that starts really early now. Like, yeah, kids on phones talking to each other, and their Instagram, and their Snapchats and everything. So
Those kids.
oh no, listen, I think that to
I'm
me, yeah,
joking.
I
I
know.
wasn't
Well,
saying that you were doing
I know.
that.
Well, to me though, I mean, I actually they're born into it. It's
Absolutely.
having to learn it later on after feeling and thinking differently is always the revelation for me. But I think some of these people are what they're doing is just truly amazing. I get asked an awful lot, and I don't know if this is going to be in your questions or not, but I get asked an awful lot. How did you break in? How would you, I want to do this. How do you suggest that I break in? And I tell them how I broke in it was a very different time. It
Mm,
just was things were different. I'll tell you what I do now, and then I'd be on social media. I'd be putting art out, I'd be putting stories out, I'd be doing everything out there every day.
yeah.
Put that stuff out there, and people are very worried about the other question again is people are very worried about their idea being taken.
Mm,
Uh, and I've been in a lot of these kind of panels, and I was on one panel, and there was a lawyer and an agent, and all of these people talking to people about how to protect their idea before they even go out and show it around. And I said, if you only have one idea, first off, you are not in the right business. You got to have a million of them. And guess what? Who here has an idea for an area 54 or an area, or a dreamscape land,
right.
or a,
Yeah.
a sword and sorcerer this where there's something like that. And everybody, has these. It's not the ideas themselves, it's in the telling, and it's in the execution of it, really is where the big difference is. And all these guys over here can protect that idea, but they cannot protect that execution. And the only way you're going to get better at doing those things is you don't wait and release it. You do what stand-up comics do all the time. You go to any of these off nights stand-up comic stages around here. You'll see Jay Leno trying out jokes. Dave Chappelle
Yep.
will walk up. They just go through their jokes to see which ones are working, so they're crafting their act. And you got to think about it in those terms too. And that's something very different that I think a lot of artists and that business mindset and that artist mindset. Uh, you, these things are so precious to you because they're your ideas and you love them, and you wouldn't work on them if you didn't. But you also don't know how other people are going to take it. And until you show it around, and one of the biggest things in art, and I think even for writers too, is writer circles, readers, beta testers. In art, we would have other artists sit there and analyze the work. It was always as a critique, but it was always meant to give you a better idea of what it was you were hoping to accomplish and what was actually being transmitted. And even from my theater background, all of that stuff is super important. And a lot of people are terrified about showing anything before it's all finished. Um, and I don't know if you get good at your craft if you don't go through also that other process too. If you don't find a secure way to do it, then you have to do it out in the wild with the presenting it to different people and seeing how they react to it. And yeah, there's a chance that some people could take some of your ideas. I've had that happen. But I think it's a risk if you're going to get any better and if you're going to learn stuff, it's part of the recipe. You guys just
Yeah.
kind of mix it in there.
Right. Get it out there. The best way to protect your ideas is to have them out in the world
Yeah.
so no one could steal them before and put them out into the world instead of you.
Right. And
Yeah.
nowadays you have defenders who will go, "Oh, that idea! I saw that. This person." So
Right.
you've got people who have presented themselves and made themselves guardians of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's a good segue because I wanted to turn back to comics, and specifically, you've done your share of creator-owned comics, specifically the Nightmarist, the Great Unknown. Um, how did you know? First of all, where did you get the ideas? But how did you know that the time was right
Hmm.
and the idea was ready to put out in the world and execute?
Right. No, that's a great question. Well, first off, the Great Unknown. I have finished the remaining issues. Just I haven't put them all out, and I am actually also working with Sean McManus. I'm writing something, he's drawing it, and it's taken us about 8 years to put together. But I can't announce it just yet because I still have to finish lettering it. But uh, in those processes, just to get back to your question, how do you know? Um, I have a writer's circle now that I present ideas to, and I consider them pretty good and pretty, they're going to be very honest with me, which is super important. I also trust their input, and they also have great suggestions. So, my writer circle is the Man of Action guys, but then I also have, uh, people outside of that too. So if I have an idea and I present it and I get a general positive response from it across the board, like the Nightmarist, then I know it's something to take the time and put the effort in because that's all sweat equity. I wasn't getting paid for any of that, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of hours. Um, but from a financial point of view, Ben 10 was doing okay. And I had a couple of, uh, before that, working in comic books, you are on a monthly book. It is a grind. I've never worked harder. And I've had every menial job you possibly could imagine. I started working at 12. I'm one of those guys. I walked to school and 20 million miles of snow. But I, that was so hard making those monthly books. Um, that what you do is you start to learn how to do things quickly. Doesn't necessarily always mean it's the best. Like you would be really wonderful to explore a little, take a little time, find another way than the one that gets the work done right way. And so, what Ben 10 offered me during those times was a period to explore a little more, to try art styles out and stuff. And I knew I had that the Nightmarist. I do like a good dreamscape story. That was my dreamscape story. I also just love trippy art and abstract art, and I wanted to see how I could incorporate some of those things. And I loved horror, so it was just enough elements of interest and also ones that were a little more of an extension outside of what I normally do, that it felt like it was a good challenge. And then the Great Unknown, uh, I had had this idea that, and this was just around 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. when I started realizing that we're kind of with the computers and now AI and all of this stuff, and they even did it in the Winter Soldier. You'll be able to really know somebody else's mind before you ever meet them if you know how to compile metadata together, if you know how to take a look at it. I was very deeply interested in all of that, and I just like the idea of somebody who was a slacker who was always talking about ideas, which I kind of was probably a stand-in for that. Somebody else taking all of those ideas and because you put a little piece here, put a little piece there, put a little piece there out on the internet or whatever, and somebody could put it all together and go, oh, that's an idea, and literally steal your idea, not your execution of the idea, not just an idea, but and so that's what that was the, the synthesis for that. And what's the difference between if you're not actually doing these things and you're putting little partial ideas out there for other people to do, then and you're not actually acting on them, who's at fault there? You, or them for doing the work. There's this old adage in any kind of collaboration, or actually any work. It's 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration, and so I would just took that and said, there's a character out there who's providing the 10% inspiration, and everybody else is doing the 90%, and he wants his cut of the pie. So that's where that story came around. And anybody I told that to, everybody was feeling like that was a possibility. Just like right now, everybody's trying to understand AI,
Mhm.
and where it's going to have a real place inside of stuff. The fact that social media and TikTok, these short form platforms, people were putting out content like they were doing acts. They were getting friends together and then they would edit stuff. And now everything's just going to be that whole area is just going to be completely consumed by AI, because that stuff you can generate very quickly, and all you need is a quick little idea, and then it'll pull from all of these other things and put it out there very quickly, and it's going to completely fill those shorter platforms up with a lot of that stuff. And
Right.
so any kind of like thought out, more traditional approach material that you would vet, you would build, you construct with your friends, all of that kind of stuff, it's going to need to find a different venue, and maybe it needs to be slightly longer or it needs to do something. So I mean, to me, there's a story probably in there, right in that, uh, that's very relevant, and so that's how I kind of know that when I'm feeling like that and everybody I talk to is feeling like that, I know there's a story there worth
Right.
pursuing.
Right. And that the timing's right. This is something that will resonate at this point in time.
Exactly.
Not too early, not too late. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
with the love of with science fiction and taking something and going just a little further,
mhm.
you do you can you can give the illusion of, and I guess it is, it's like this is where we could go. So if we do get there, then you look super prescient and a futurist and all of those kind of things. But it doesn't take a lot just to go like, well, it could go this way or it could go that way, and just
Right.
find the best story out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to look at the opposite side of the coin, which is you've continued to do work, obviously, with the big publishers as well. One of your big ones was the Metal Men series, miniseries in 2008. How do you choose these projects? Do they come to you? Do you have inspiration and go out and seek, like, I'd like to do something with Metal Men or somewhere else?
So that one came about out of a couple of conversations. My I mean, I love DC too, but I guess if I'm going to say where I was a fanboy, I grew up with the Marvel stuff for the most part, but there was
Mhm.
a lot of DC stuff that I really love. But um, I really love the bizarre. characters that are, I love the Creeper, I love Metamorpho, I love the Metal Men. I loved all of these because they were quirky. They had potential, but they also had a heart at them that was, it wasn't, it was pure. The purpose of it, the purpose of those characters, well, much like Superman, actually, in a lot of ways too. And so I was talking to Eddie Berganza, who is editor on the Superman stuff, who Joe and I were working with. And he said, "What kind of books?" And I gave him a list. I said, "These are the characters that I would work on," and Metal Men was on that one. So I was super pumped to work on that one. Obviously, I like robots. I do a lot of robot drawing. If you take a look at any of my stuff, even Rex is a lot of different ways of taking a look at robots. I find the subject fascinating, but I also love the quirkiness of the original titles, and also with robots, the whole idea of what is conscious, what's human, what those kind of things are always implicit in a robot story. Where does humanity and machine connect, overlap, end, or begin? Those kind of things. And so they're fun characters. They're fun characters to kind of explore some of that stuff. And I think I mentioned earlier, I have two brothers. Both of them went into aerospace, and then I have a lawyer brother. But science was a big, massive part of my youth. All kinds of experiments going on in my house all the time. There's test tubes and different explosions happening, literally. Um, and so I also have a deep, abiding love for it, although I don't think I have the capacity to actually. I don't have the focus of a to be a real scientist. So I just talk to all of my friends, and where I live right next to JPL. So most of my friends are literally rocket scientists and roboticists,
Yeah.
and physicists. And so I just at every barbecue I'd ask them all the different questions about, like, hey, well, if we did this and did that, somebody would go, well, actually, because there is some weird Venn diagram overlap between
Right.
science nerds and comic nerds. Uh,
Absolutely.
that I just, those are my people. Um, and so that's how it was a couple of those things. I knew that I had a love for those characters. I love the quirkiness. I think it fit my sense of humor and also my style. And I also had access to a lot of really smart brains, so I could also sneak in a little science here and there.
Before
And
we go
that
ahead.
was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I can imagine. Before we start to wrap up, I wanted to ask, because we've talked a lot about animation, we've talked a lot about comics. How do the two compare in your mind, in terms of the dynamic, the collaboration? And then also, do you prefer one over the other? Or do you like to have the balance of both and even more media?
Uh, they're very different in some ways. Um, Let me talk about it on three different levels here. First, as an artist, from a comic book art kind of place, my very first job in animation was long before Ben 10. I did designs for this thing called Lunatics, which was superhero versions of the Looney Tunes.
Yeah, remember that.
And I did a bunch of design work for that. And that was kind of I had also worked on Fern Gully and a couple of other things. I had bopped around inside of animation, doing storyboards and doing some design work. And in animation, one of the things that is so important about design is simplicity, because it needs to be repeated. It needs to also have enough variability so that you can tell a story that you can get a lot of different emotions out of it. So it is about stuffing the most you can into the simplest forms. And for me, for comic books, it's almost the exact opposite. Like I grew up on Kirby stuff, and that's just an explosion of energy. He draws the air, when he did that stuff. And so they are two different approaches to art, or there can be, or at their art, that's where it's acceptable. If you try to do all of that big, giant graphic stuff, you can now with a lot of robotic and AI assistance. But when I was working there, it had to be simple because it was a lot of manual work. And so it was about a thickness of a line, it was about the shape of a silhouette and things like that that were essential in animation. That in comic books, it was more about the individual style. At least the one that I grew up in, it wasn't about a company style. It was, oh, that artist and that writer are doing that book. I'm interested because it's that genre. And so both challenged me in ways that I loved. And one was I love comic books because now, and even working for the big guy still, I still get to bring a lot of just me into it. And as an artist and as a writer, that's very fulfilling. And I always, you always want people to really like your work, but you are doing that because you also love the medium. I love the medium, so uh, I now write and draw and ink and color my own books because I can be a control freak. That's where I get to just do my thing. In animation, that's about collaboration. That's about team building. That's about being in a bigger group, hearing the best idea and supporting it, not necessarily who's coming from you, and how to create it and synthesize it and make sure that everybody feels like they can move on to the next step. And so that's a very different thing, and it's a different skill. And those two things of being alone and being a part of a bigger group are skills that not everybody has. And I'm really happy that I've got to develop both of those because one is having a trust in your own voice, and the other one is having trust in the group. And those are just two different places. So I don't know if I would ever choose one over the other, but when I'm feeling like I need one or the other, just creatively, uh, to either go back to myself and re-energize, I work on a book. I've got 3 or 4 books I'm constantly working on right now that are, in different stages, and I'm trying out different things. And then when I need to grow and hear other ideas and stuff like that, I get inside of a bigger group and work with them. I'm trying to keep a foot in both worlds. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay.
it seems like the perfect kind of balance of that kind of working. You want to, I struggle with this too. I mean, there are some things that you're working on that you want to keep kind of close to the vest and put all of your individual energy into, but I also get a lot of energy from bouncing ideas off of other people and working collaboratively. So it seems like having both of these media um, and working in both of these media gives you the opportunities to do both.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. And even from my theater background, working with actors, doing voice acting and talking to them and directing some of this stuff, I get to try it. I get to even flex those muscles. Those older muscles. Um, so I do. I get to kind of all the things I was interested in. I get to kind of find and get paid for it. uh, uh, get get to kind of explore those things. So I'm very lucky when it comes to that. But I also am somebody who I also think I know when I need to either uh, kind of cloister myself or open myself up when I'm feeling a little exhausted or lost in whatever it is I'm doing. One or the other is always a good kind of, it's always good to have both happening at the same time because, you never know when you're going to need to do those things. At least I don't. um, you know, either withdraw or put yourself in, you know. So yeah, I think I just tried to construct my ADHD life into into my business format. You know, instead of turning it into and making it a headwind, turning it into a tailwind.
It's a great way of looking at it. Okay, so what are you working on now, either individually or collaboratively, that we can all look forward to?
Well, there are two things. One, I am, and I will probably at the end of this year make the announcement. I've been working for quite some time with Sean McManus, a great artist and good friend. We met when we were working at Stanley Media, and I presented this idea. He told me he wanted to draw something, and I've just always been an admirer of his style. It's something that I wouldn't can't do, not like he can. And we've been working on this thing piecemeal for but we wanted to get it all finished before we release, before we get the first, we market the first one out. So it'll be an 8 issue mini series of an original idea, and I'll probably be announcing that at the end of this year. And then Steve Seagle and I are working on something. I don't know if Steve mentioned this. I can't tell you because we have to wait until it gets announced, but I'm working with him. I'm drawing it. So those are two books that are coming out at the moment. Um, and all of the other production stuff, it's always in some kind of development or production. We're finishing up. If anybody is interested, we did this video game adaptation for an animated. Turned it into an animated show. It's a one of these murder mascot stories called Hello Neighbor, and it's really a fun game. It's it's sneaking into your neighbor's house because you think something creepy is going on, and then there's a lot of Hitchcock kind of suspense and scares in it, and we adapted that into an animated show that's airs. We're showing it on YouTube, but you can find it um, at the Tiny Build site, and it's been a lot of fun because what we got to do is tell much more adult stories that have higher stakes. And what I mean by adult stories is there's adult themes and things that are happen in it, but it's kind of in the Stranger Things kind of category. I guess you would want to put it kids with flashlights, but if Stranger Things and It are the and not Goonies and ET over here. This one's over in the It and Stranger Things category of story. So that's out there. Check
Very
that out.
cool.
And
All right.
I've been directing those. So
Nice.
yeah.
All right, yeah, we'll send everybody that way. How can fans follow you and your work? Should we send them to the Man of Action website?
Sure. I'm on all the major social medias. I'm on Instagram, either MOA Duncan or some variation there, MOA Rouleau. I'm also on both Blue Sky and X and all the social media stuff. So I do make an awful lot of announcements. Any of the art that I'm doing, and I do an awful lot of commission art. I post that on my Instagram if you actually want to take a look at where my art is these days and what it looks like. And then on X and on Blue Sky, any upcoming projects. So, and I also answer a lot of Ben 10 questions. So,
Yeah, what are those things they do on Reddit? Ask me anything. Yeah,
yes,
have you done
yes,
AMAs
I
on Ben
have.
10?
I have. I've done a few. I've done a few of those. The granular level that people want to know how certain things operate is always, I think, really kind of amazing. Uh, they're doing more work than I am half the time.
Right, right. They've thought about it even more than the creators have. Yeah,
They have, and it does force me to go, oh, you know what? We do need to answer that, things like that. So it becomes a revelation.
that's good.
But it's a I'm going to always be very deeply grateful to those fan bases. I'm you know, I told this to somebody the other day, and then maybe this is a good place, for outro. But I think when I first started doing stuff in comic books and things like that, my mom's an art teacher. She was classically trained art, sculptures, Rembrandt, that kind of stuff. She did not hold a high comic book art and pop art. She didn't put that up on a pedestal. So I think I probably always had to compete a little with that uh, thought in my head when I was doing this. But I realized that when I was a kid, people like Neil Adams and John Byrne and all Roy Thomas and Jim Shooter, who just passed away, all these guys, and all Emery Severin, all of them filled my life with a joy that I'm going to forever be thankful for, because it really kind of populated my world and filled my head full of possibilities and so I owe them a debt of gratitude that I'll never be able to pay. But I'm in it now, and if I can provide something like that for the next person, like just be in the bucket line to take it and kind of go, here you go, guys. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty worth it. So,
And we're back. Duncan, thanks for being on the program. Really enjoyed talking to you about your entire career, everything that's going on. We look forward to more work from you and Man of Action. So everybody look out for more Duncan Rouleau and Man of Action productions. That'll do it for this episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. We'll be back with a couple more episodes this week. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe wherever you got this episode, and we'll see you next issue.